Hello, Christ Church. We are in day 3 of our study on Psalm 89. My name is Paul Fowler, our Lake Forest campus pastor. Glad to share with you again today. Today we're going to be not just looking at Psalm 89, but also 2 Samuel chapter 7. So my encouragement to you for some homework for you is after this, I want you to look at Psalm 7 and have your finger in Psalm 89 and go back and forth and see the different connections that are between what the prophet Nathan tells David and what we see here. Because Ethan the psalmist, who had to have been there while Nathan was giving this among the court. Remember, he was the cymbal player at the time that David lived. And there is this kind of beautiful poetic way that Ethan takes what the prophet Nathan has said in Psalm 7 and kind of wraps it into how he is worshiping God through this. I'm going to go ahead and read to us starting in verse 9 in Psalm 89. Once you spoke in a vision to your faithful people, you said, I have bestowed strength on a warrior. I have raised up a young man from among the people. I have found David, my servant, with my sacred oil I have anointed him. My hand will sustain him. Surely my arm will strengthen him. The enemy will not get the better of him. The wicked will not oppress him. I will crush his foes before him and strike down his adversaries. My faithful love will be with him, and through my name his horn will be exalted. I will set his hand over the sea, his right hand over the rivers. He will call out to me, You are my Father, my God, the rock of my salvation. And I will appoint him to be my firstborn, the most exalted of the kings of the earth. I will maintain my love to him forever, and my covenant with him will never fail. I will establish his line forever, his throne as long as the heavens endure. If his sons forsake my law and do not follow my statutes, if they violate my decrees and fail to keep my commands, I will punish their sin with rod, their iniquity with flogging. But I will not take my love from him, nor will I ever betray my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant or alter what my lips have uttered. Once for all I have sworn by my holiness, and I will not lie to David, that his line will continue forever, and his throne endure, before me like the sun. It will be established forever, like the moon, the faithful witness in the sky. So this is Ethan, in his own way, kind of reinforcing what we saw in 2 Samuel chapter 7, which is when the prophet Nathan comes to David and says, I've chosen you, and I'm going to make a covenant with you, and I'm going to establish your throne for forever. So I want to walk through this and show you a few different ways that this so closely relates. In verse 19, Ethan says, you once spoke in a vision. And in 2 Samuel verse 4, we see that a vision comes to Nathan the prophet. Also in verse 19, it says, I've raised up a young man from among the people. In verse 8, it says, I took you from the pasture to be a ruler in 2 Samuel chapter 7. In verse 20, it says, I've found David, my servant. And in verse 5, in 2 Samuel 7, Nathan says, my servant David. This is God talking to David. In verse 22, it says, the wicked will not oppress him. In verse 10, in 2 Samuel 7, it says the same thing. The wicked will not oppress him. Verse 24, my faithful love will be with him. In verse 15, it says, my love will never be taken from him. We see here in verse 29, it says, his throne will endure as long as the heavens endure. And in verse 13, it says that he will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. There's more that I could go on, but this is continued to be repeated. They are quoting each other in some sense, where Ethan has now turned God's covenant to David through the prophet Nathan in 2 Samuel 7 to this beautiful poetry and imagery that we see of God's love and faithfulness specifically to David. Now, some of you might say, but wait a second. If God has established this Davidic throne for forever, where is that now? Where is that love and faithfulness? Has it ran out since there's no temple on the Temple Mount? Well, when we understand who Jesus is and what he came to do, we understand that Jesus is in the lineage of David. And that now Jesus has this actual claim to be king because he's from that Davidic kingdom. And we know that Jesus, after he dies and he raises again to new life, he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God. He is ruling on the throne of heaven. That's how we see God's love and his faithfulness to his word, is when we look at what he had promised to David hundreds of years later when Jesus comes to live and what he teaches, and then he dies, and when he raises again to rule. That's his faithfulness. But that's also his love for us. My question for you is, have you embraced that love for you? Do you see that Jesus is the one who knows you, who loves you, who died in your place for you. And what's helpful is maybe you're saying, yes, I've done that. I know all these things. Well, you have to remember God's faithfulness. When it talks about how in verse 30 that someone might come and forsake the law, they might do the wrong things, it doesn't mean that God says, well, my covenant is done with you. It's not about what we do or what we don't do that somehow we earn salvation. It is only by God's love and faithfulness to us. I hope you take time to say, God, thank you for your love for me, your faithfulness to me, in spite of the things we've done in our lives.